Welcome to the Rugby Obsession Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're pulling on a really interesting thread coming out of the Wallabies camp. It's all about head coach Joe Schmidt and his evolving plans for releasing players for those big British and Irish Lions pre-test tour games.
That's right. We're digging into an article from Planet Rugby today, and it really focuses on some recent comments from Schmidt, comments that seem to show maybe a bit of a shift after some earlier criticism he faced.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. Let's unpack Schmidt's initial plan for those tour matches, look at the reaction that stirred up, and then explore how his thinking seems to have changed more recently. It's a fascinating look at the pressures involved ahead of, let's face it, a massive tour.
Absolutely huge.
And look, if you're obsessed with rugby like we are, and you want to get beneath the surface, understand the strategy, the stories, make sure you hit that subscribe button for Rugby Obsession wherever you're listening right now. You won't want to miss these deep dives.
Okay, let's get into it then. If you cast your mind back to, say, mid-May, Joe Schmidt made some initial comments that definitely got people talking in the rugby world.
Yeah, his first take seemed quite firm, almost rigid. The main idea, as the article lays out, was about safeguarding a specific group of players. What exactly did he mean by that?
Well, he talked about protecting what he saw as his top 23 to 25 players, basically the core group he was building his test series squad around.
Right.
And the main reason given, according to the Planet Rugby piece, was pretty straightforward: avoid injuries.
Which, I mean, you can see the logic, can't you? Lions tours are famously tough. They're attritional. You absolutely need your best players available for those 3 huge test matches.
Definitely.
Putting them into potentially bruising midweek games against a fired-up Lions team, that carries obvious risks. It's a long tour. Player welfare is massive.
It is. And his thinking for the other players, the ones outside that core 23-25 group, was different. Based on those early comments, they were the ones slated to get game time against the Lions in those non-test matches.
Okay.
And this was framed as, a good opportunity for them, a chance to get experience against top international players, especially maybe if they weren't realistically pushing for a test jersey right then.
Okay, so the initial picture was keep the main test guys wrapped in cotton wool, more or less, shielded from those tour games, maybe training separately, and then use those games to give the wider squad members a chance to step up, get exposure, develop against elite opposition. A clear split.
Yeah, it seemed very much designed around test series readiness above all else, and then player development for the rest.
Avoid injuries for the key guys, get game time for the others. Sounded like a very targeted Schmidt approach initially.
That was the message, yeah.
Right. But here's where it gets interesting, because that plan, well, it didn't exactly land smoothly everywhere. This is where the Planet Rugby article highlights the backlash, the criticism.
No, it definitely sparked some strong reactions. The article points specifically to the veteran British rugby writer Stephen Jones, writing in his column in the Sunday Times. And he didn't mince his words.
He didn't mince words, putting it mildly. The article says he called Schmidt's initial plan a betrayal of the Lions. Betrayal, that's powerful language in any sport, let alone rugby tours. What was Jones's main point? Why use such a strong term?
Well, Jones's argument, as reported, was essentially that the Lions, this historic touring side, travel halfway across the world, bringing all that history and expectation, and then to potentially face what he called an inadequate side in those tour games that traditionally build momentum and test combinations.
Yeah.
He felt that was a betrayal of the whole spirit of the invitation to tour. It wasn't just about winning or losing those games. It was about the quality, the respect shown through the opposition provided.
So it's really an argument about the integrity of the whole tour package, not just the tests. The idea that these midweek games are part of the Lions' fabric, needing to be genuinely competitive. And Jones even suggested, didn't he, that maybe the Lions should have locked in opponent strength in the contract, or even thought about touring elsewhere if that wasn't guaranteed. That really shows how seriously he views the tradition of those tour games.
It does. It speaks volumes about the perceived importance of those fixtures beyond just being warm-ups. But it's fair to say the article also includes a counterpoint, a much blunter take from an ex-Wallaby.
Ah, yes. The piece mentions an unnamed former Wallaby saying something like, the Lions are supposed to beat those tours teams anyway. If we, present that neutrally, what's that perspective saying?
It's really a view that puts almost all the emphasis on the test series. It kind of downplays the tour games. It suggests the Lions, being this elite squad drawn from 4 nations, are so strong they should roll over any Super Rugby side that isn't at full strength.
Right, just get on with it.
Yeah, basically framing those games as primarily the Lions' business, their chance to sort out combinations, build form, rather than being a major test for the Australian sides. It's a much more pragmatic view, maybe even a bit dismissive of the tour game tradition compared to Jones.
And that really throws the different pressures into sharp relief, doesn't it? You've got the national coach, Schmidt, laser focused on winning the tests. Then you've got this broader expectation around the Lions tour itself, the history, the spectacle of those midweek clashes. It's a clear tension.
A tension Schmidt has obviously had to navigate.
Which leads us perfectly into his more recent comments, also covered in the Planet Rugby piece. It looks like his thinking might have, well, shifted somewhat, moved away from that very strict separation.
Yes, the language he's using now is definitely different. He's started talking about the approach for those tour games being more of a mix and match.
Mix and match.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds much more flexible than safeguarding 25 guys no matter what. How does this mix and match idea actually work? What's different?
Well, he hinted that some players who are actually named in the main Wallaby squad, guys you'd think would be in the mix for test spots, might not go straight into the Wallaby camp for that whole pre-test buildup.
Really?
Yeah. Instead, they could potentially play for their Super Rugby teams against the Lions in those tour games first.
Now that is a significant change.
Yeah.
It's not just the fringe guys getting a run anymore. Did the article give any clues about who this might apply to?
It gave examples of the types of players based on Schmidt's comments. So think about players maybe coming back from injury who desperately need match fitness before they're ready for test intensity.
Okay.
Or maybe players whose Super Rugby teams finished up early didn't make the playoffs, so they've had a potentially long joik without playing competitive rugby.
Right, so instead of a blanket ban on any potential test player playing those games, he's now looking at it more strategically, using the fixtures for guys who actually need the game time for fitness or rhythm, even if they're in his Wallabies plans.
That seems to be the gist of it, yeah. It's a more nuanced player-by-player approach. It acknowledges that being ready isn't just about avoiding hits. Sometimes it's about getting minutes under your belt. And for some, these Lions Tour games might actually be the best way to achieve that before the test window truly opens.
Okay, so that's the shift. Now the big question, why the change? What reasons did Schmidt give for moving from that initial safeguarding strategy to this more flexible mix and match idea?
Well, according to the Planet Rugby article, he offered a couple of key reasons for this adjustment in thinking. Firstly, he specifically mentioned wanting to make sure the Australian clubs are competitive against the Lions.
Ah, okay. So that speaks directly to the Stephen Jones type of criticism, doesn't it? The worry about inadequate sides. That suggests he's heard that feedback?
It certainly looks that way, acknowledging that expectation both here and overseas for the Aussie teams to put up a decent fight. And the second reason he gave was purely about player preparation. He pointed out that for some players, especially those whose season ended early or coming off injuries, it could be, 4 or 5 weeks since they'll have played by the time those Lions games roll around.
Yeah, 4 or 5 weeks is a long time out at that level, especially heading into a Lions series.
Yeah.
You'd be rusty.
Exactly. So his logic, as quoted in the article, is that getting a game under their belt before they actually come into Wallaby camp may be the most advantageous situation for us. He's framing it not as a climb down, but actually as the best outcome for the Wallabies overall.
Interesting.
Balancing the need for decent opposition for the Lions with getting his own players match fit. It's presented as a strategic win-win, potentially.
So it's about optimizing his own squad's readiness, even if that means some likely Wallabies play against the Lions first. And the article also throws in that Fiji test on July 6th, doesn't it? Another factor in the planning mix.
Yeah, that just adds another layer to the whole player management puzzle he's trying to solve. It's not just Lions tour game versus Lions test match. There's another international fixture right there early on that needs consideration too.
Complex stuff. It's about getting everyone the right amount of work at the right time.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's pull this together for you, the listener. We've walked through Joe Schmidt's initial plan, strict safeguarding of top players. We've seen the criticism that sparked, concerns about devaluing the tour games, and now we've arrived at this newer mix and match approach.
And what's really striking here, looking at the source material, is that tension it highlights. You've got these different, perfectly valid priorities pulling in different directions. You have the national coach, Schmidt, whose job depends on winning that test series. Full stop.
Yep.
But then you have the history, the expectation around a Lions tour, the role of those provincial or club games, the whole spectacle. Schmidt's shift suggests he's actively trying to balance these competing demands.
And why should you care about all this? Well, look, it's not just behind-the-scenes rugby politics. Schmidt's decisions directly shape the tour you'll experience. Will those midweek games be genuine contests or glorified training runs? Which Aussie stars might you see tested against the Lions outside the main tests? It's a real-time case study in managing players, fitness, expectations, and tradition, all heading into the biggest event in Australian rugby for years. It's like watching a strategic game unfold.
It really shows how coaching strategies, even those focused initially on something like injury prevention, have to be adaptable. They change based on feedback, on player needs, on the bigger picture.
Absolutely. Understanding the complexity is part of the fun of following the sport, isn't it? And hey, if you are enjoying this kind of deep dive, getting into the why behind the headlines, do us a solid, hit that subscribe button for Rugby Obsession. Make sure you don't miss any of our analysis.
This whole situation does raise a good question for you listening, though. Thinking about everything we've discussed, Schmidt's initial plan, the betrayal criticism from Jones, the shift to mix and match, what really stands out to you, do you side more with the traditionalists worried about the tour games being weakened? Or do you see the logic in Schmidt's evolving plan, trying to make the clubs competitive while getting specific players vital game time, all geared towards that ultimate goal, winning the test series?
It's not straightforward, is it? There are strong arguments on both sides reflecting different values within rugby.
Definitely a balancing act. No easy answers.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, we've charted the course of Joe Schmidt's thinking on the Lions tour games. He started with a pretty clear safeguard the stars policy, aiming to protect maybe 23, 25 key players from injury risk.
But following criticism and perhaps further reflection on player needs, he's now signaling a more flexible mix-and-match strategy.
Right. And as the Planet Rugby article suggests, this seems driven by two main things. Wanting to ensure the Australian Super Rugby teams put up a competitive fight against the Lions.
And strategically using those tour games to get crucial match fitness into certain players, maybe guys coming back from injury, or those who've had a long break before they join the main Wallabies camp, all framed as finding the most advantageous situation for Wallaby success.
How it actually pans out when the tour kicks off, that'll be fascinating to watch.
Absolutely.
And maybe a final thought for you to chew on. Just consider how many different forces are always at play in these huge rugby moments. You've got the national coach's laser focus on the tests. You've got player welfare and individual conditioning needs. You've got club pride and competitiveness. And overlaying it all, you have the history and traditions of something as massive as a Lions tour. Schmidt's adjustments are a perfect example of a coach trying to weave through that complex web.
It's a constant negotiation between different priorities.
It really is. A fascinating challenge. Well, don't forget to subscribe to Rugby Obsession for more deep dives into the strategy, the stories, the heart of rugby.
Thank you for listening to the Rugby Obsession Deep Dive. We will look forward to you listening to our next episode.